My name is Lori Bienvenu, and I'm the Executive Director of the Jacob Crouch Foundation. I have master's degrees in counseling and psychology, and basically this is my job. We do educational programs such as the one that we're going to do tonight. So we're going to talk about a few statistics for you guys. Nothing too in-depth because numbers kind of bore people. We don't want anybody going to sleep. So these numbers are 2010. We realize that is a little dated, but this is the most recent statewide data that we actually have. So you can see that Lafayette in 2005 had 25 suicides, but ranked 7th in the state, meaning only 6 parishes in the state had more suicides than Lafayette. And the next on the list we have St. Landry with 20 suicides. And at the bottom, the remainder of those parishes, or the parishes where Crouch Foundation provides services, so that's going to be pretty much the remainder of Region 4 with the exception of St. Mary Parish. But you can see that all of those parishes, we have 64 parishes in Louisiana, and at the bottom of that list we have Ramon Parish with number 32. So every parish in the state is in the 50th percentile, every parish in Region 4 as far as completed suicides. That tells us that we have some work to do. Next slide. Locally, this is data from Lafayette Parish Public High Schools. This is the Caring Communities Youth Survey. This is given to students in 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grades every 2 years. So in 2014, 2.9% of 6th graders reported high symptoms of depression. Now when we say high depressive symptoms, these are most likely going to be students who would be diagnosed as having depression. 4.7% of 8th graders, 5.4% of 10th graders, and 2.8% of 12th graders. Another thing to note about this is for moderate symptoms of depression, roughly 69 to 72% of the population of each grade reported moderate symptoms of depression. So depression is high no matter how we look at it, but as far as diagnosable conditions, roughly between 2.8 and 5.4%. In the middle, we have percentage of students who have considered suicide. In 6th grade, 10.7% of 6th graders have thought of suicide. 25.7% of 8th graders. And the numbers just go up. 30.6% of 10th graders, 31.2% of 12th graders. So again, these are kids that are having thoughts of suicide. At the bottom, students who've actually attempted. 3.1% of 6th graders. So these are 11-year-olds. So 3%, 11, 12-year-olds, 3% of those kids have actually attempted suicide, which is kind of scary when you think about that. In 8th grade, major transition year, there are a lot of kids are going from a middle school to a high school. So 7.9% of 8th graders have attempted. In 10th grade and 12th grade, they're having to start considering career opportunities, transitioning from high school to college, those sorts of things. So in 10th grade, 13.2%, and 12th grade, 8.3%. Yes, sir.
Do you know the numbers behind those percents?
What do you mean?
How many 10th graders, for example, were surveyed, or how many?
This survey is given out to every student at every school.
Public
and private? Yes, sir. Yes. So again, this is the Caring Communities Youth Survey. You can actually get school-wide data. So if you just want to see, if you want to see a particular school, for instance, you can click on the data for that school. And to get this information, you go to the PCARD Center website, and you can download data for. I think they started doing this in 2006 or 2008. So you can get data back from 2008 to current for individual schools, for districts, parishes, or even statewide. Next, please. So groups that are at elevated risk for suicide. So this is what we look at to understand where our prevention efforts should be placed, but also to understand risk associated with suicide. At the very top, we have LGBT, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Individuals that have sexual orientation issues or gender identity issues typically have higher risk for suicide than individuals that are not going through gender orientation or sexual identity. So divorcees, particularly males, males are typically losing access to their homes, to their families, to their children. They're having to move out of the house. Oftentimes this causes problems at work. So we typically see more an increased risk for males that are getting divorced as opposed to females whose risk actually goes down slightly. Individuals that are unemployed, there's about a 6-month period for this. So roughly 6 months following unemployment, we see the suicide rate start to increase. By this point, they've usually gone through their savings. They're having to start to depend on others for support, and so the risk increases at that point. Individuals in rural areas, loners, or limited access to resources. The reason we say individuals in rural areas or loners is because it typically boils down to limited access to resources. If the resources don't exist, or if people can't gain access to them, then they don't have the support that they need when times get tough, and this is why the risk increases. We're going to talk a little bit about mental disorders next, so we'll skip that one for now, but individuals with a current plan. People that have planned a suicide show preparation. It shows that some thought has gone into it. It's more likely to happen. So if, for instance, if I say that I'm taking a trip, I know where I'm going, our room is booked, our bags are packed, we're leaving tomorrow, and you say I'm going on a trip tomorrow, I'm not sure where. Who's more likely to go on a trip? Me, right? Because it's planned, it's done. All I have to do is get up and go. We see the same thing with suicide. If there's already a plan in place, there's a much greater likelihood that that plan is going to get carried out because the thinking behind it's already been done. Individuals' life stress and mental pain, I'm going to talk about this one in a second also. Prior suicide behavior. This is important from two perspectives. From the perspective of the person who's had a prior attempt, but also the perspective of the person who's had prior attempts in their family. So if we have a family that has a history of depression, a history of maladaptive coping skills, a history of suicide attempts, in that family, suicide almost becomes socially acceptable. And not only that, but suicide becomes a way to cope. If we have, maybe a third-generation patient who is experiencing problems with depression, who's learned that suicide is acceptable from their family, who has a family who's never coped with depression, they're passing all of those things down to this younger person. So for them, suicide is what their family knows. It's how they deal with their problems. There's a bigger risk there. From the perspective of the person who's actually attempted, think about what that must be like. So think about the first time somebody's considering suicide, and maybe a first attempt. So there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of unknowns. Imagine that person standing on the ledge thinking about jumping. Imagine what must be going through their head at that point. And then think about maybe 5 years down the road, and this may be their 20th time attempting. It's not as scary as it was before. It's much more familiar. They know what to do. They know what to expect. It's going to be a lot easier to go towards that. So prior behavior, prior suicides for the person and prior suicides for their family both increase risk. And at the bottom, we have any individual who's experienced loss or change. So loss or change are painful, and they cause us to experience pain. A lot of people don't know how to deal with those, particularly if it's a sudden loss or a sudden change, and it kind of catches them off guard, knocks them off their feet, and they find themselves in a position of considering suicide. So mental illness. At the very top, we have release from facilities. So we tend to think that when people go inpatient, they're getting treatment, they're going to get better, they're going to come home, life is going to be different for them. Oftentimes what happens, though, is they go into these facilities, they're surrounded by staff, by family, by friends, by people that are supportive, by doctors and nurses and whatnot. They're living in a supported environment. When they get home, they no longer have that constant care from doctors and nurses and counselors. Maybe their family is not supportive or doesn't understand. That supportive environment is essentially removed from them. Plus, all of the problems they were experiencing when they went in are still there. So they come out thinking that things are going to be different. If they're not, then it causes their depression to increase. And so the 2 weeks following release from treatment is actually a greater time of suicide risk than sometimes even before they went in. Mood disorders are any disorder that has a depressive component. So 72% of the individuals that died by suicide had clinical depression in the weeks before they died. So we know that there's a strong correlation with depression and suicide, but keep in mind this is only 72%. So 28% of the individuals that die by suicide are not depressed. What do those people look like? It's going to be very different. Schizophrenia, roughly 10% of the schizophrenic population dies by suicide, and it's usually related to issues of hopelessness. There's nothing I can do to make myself better, or hopelessness. Things are never going to be better. I'm going to have to live with this diagnosis forever. 3 to 9% of the personality disorder population dies by suicide. This is a tough population because a lot of times we say they're attention seekers, so they're doing things just to gain attention, and they may be, but we still need to treat those threats and those talks seriously because they still may go through with it. And then at the very bottom, substance abuse. So half of the individuals that died by suicide had greater than 0.08 blood alcohol content at the time of death. So basically, they were legally intoxicated when they died. We don't know how this works, if the alcohol encourages the suicide or if the alcohol triggers depression, which causes the suicide. We just know that there's a correlation. Next, please. These things, like I said, are important because they tell us how to gear our interventions. They also tell us a lot about risk. But just remember, just because somebody doesn't fit neatly into one of these categories, it doesn't mean that they may not be at risk for suicide. They very well could be. So think of the popular student who loves everybody loves them, straight A's, maybe the cheerleader, prettiest girl in the class, seems like has everything going for her. That girl may have some pain in her life that she doesn't know how to deal with and may be considering suicide. So anybody can be at risk. These just kind of give us an idea of greater risk. I mentioned pain a little while. Oh, I took that slide out. I'm going to talk briefly about it. I mentioned pain a little while ago, and when we talk about warning signs, a lot of the warning signs that we see are reactions to pain. It's people expressing their pain. Something that's really important about pain, though, is it's not our perception of the pain. Their situation to us may not seem that big and that grave, but maybe for them it is. Maybe it's very extreme, and it's something that they don't know how to deal with. Our job as a caregiver is to understand their pain, not so much to judge their situation, but to respect it and understand where they're coming from. And the only way to understand the pain that someone is in is really to ask and listen. I think you can skip to. Thank you. So some warning signs for suicide. This slide is not all-encompassing. There may be some warning signs that if you know somebody personally, you may recognize something as a warning sign that might not be on the slide, but this is a pretty comprehensive list. So at the top we have actions or things that they may do to let us know that they're thinking of suicide. Remember, a lot of these are expressions of pain. So writing about death, losing interest, giving things away, acting irrationally, impulsively, and recklessly, drug use, drug or alcohol use, school performance, or work performance may change, and withdrawal. Withdrawal from family, from friends, from social situations, from activities, anything that they previously enjoyed. Some feelings that they may have that either they communicate to us or that we understand as being present. They may feel humiliated or like a failure. A lot of people feel guilt and shame, and a lot of times it's guilt or shame that they're not carrying their load, or they feel like they're a burden to their family, and that's what causes them to consider suicide. They may feel hopeless, helpless, and worthless. Those three are commonly associated with depression. They usually kind of go together. They also may feel angry, lonely, or sad. Some things that they may say to us. These can be both direct and indirect. It could be something as obvious as, I want to kill myself. Or it could be something more subtle, like, this is just too hard. I can't do this anymore. On the other side, we have physical changes. So changes or neglect in personal appearance. Somebody who's typically very neatly groomed, who cares about hair and makeup and getting their nails done, may suddenly stop all of those things. Changes in appetite, changes in sleep, changes in weight, changes in eating. Those all kind of come together. And it could be over or under. So eating and sleeping too much, or not eating or sleeping enough. change in personality and inability to concentrate. So change in personality is the big one that I usually like to focus on because we usually think about this as a negative change. So a person that's typically outgoing may become sullen and depressed and withdrawn. But the opposite can be true. We may have somebody who's very depressed who switches to happy, being happy, or even just content. And this tells us that they've made up their mind. So suicide is now their choice. Have you ever had to make a really tough decision? And then, once you make that decision, you feel better, but while you're thinking about it and you keep going over it in your mind, it's exhausting, right? Just weighing your options. As soon as you have a decision, life is so much easier. Well, that's kind of what happens with suicide. So really quickly, a story from our support group. This lady whose husband had lost his job and he was having trouble finding work and had gotten really depressed and had been that way for quite a while. And she came home from work one day and he was happy. For the first time in months, he had cleaned up the garage and was in a great mood, and they had a good dinner. They went to bed, woke up the next day, everything was fine. She's getting ready to go to work and she hears a loud noise downstairs. Well, when she runs downstairs, she found her husband dead in the garage. He had shot himself. And when she looks back, she can see that change. It's obvious. Hindsight is our worst enemy. It's easy to look back and see that something like this was a warning sign. If you don't know it's there, it's hard to look for it. So just remember that. Sometimes what appears to be a positive change is not really a positive change. And the best way to understand that is really just to ask yourself, what happened in the last 24 hours or even the last, week that caused this change? If there's no obvious reason for the cause, for the change, then you may need to start asking questions because it could be something else.
How do you approach someone that you may think is suicidal? I mean, how do you approach that? Because that's okay.
I'm about to answer that question. That's okay. That's okay.
I haven't even read the steps.
That's okay. Okay, so steps to intervention. So when you see those warning signs, you think someone might be at risk for suicide, then what do? The steps to intervention are here. So ask the tough question, listen, clarify, create an action plan, and follow through. So I'm going to go through each of these steps. If you guys grabbed brochures, you'll see all of these on your brochure. If you didn't, grab some on your way out. That little square card that we have back there has all of these steps on them with some warning signs, and it's really easy to follow. So the first step is ask the tough question. We call it the tough question because it is a tough question. The tough question is, are you thinking about suicide or are you thinking about killing yourself? It's a very hard question to ask. It's tough. It's also very important that you ask it. Not only ask it, but ask it openly and directly. If you ask in a way that's open and direct, you're encouraging an open and direct response. You're letting the person know, I'm here, I can help you, I want to help you, I'm willing and I'm able. If you ask in a way that discourages a positive response, you're probably not going to get a positive response. So some examples of ways not to ask. We suggest that you don't use words like hurting or harming for the very reason that when I think of hurt, if I hurt myself, I think, go to the hospital and get it fixed. Or when I think of an injury, maybe go get some stitches or something. I don't think of hurting as harming and harming equating to death. We need to ask in a way that lets the person know that what they're considering is final. This is the end. This is not something, you don't change your mind about suicide midway through. It's, once the act is done, it's a final, most times it's a final choice. We also, the second statement, you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? Well, you've kind of just told them and asking that way that you don't really want a positive response, right? You're not going to do this, are you? It's like saying, we can talk about it, but this isn't an option. They need to know that they have options. We just need to lead them, guide them to the right option. And at the very end, you're not going to do anything stupid or crazy, are you? We've already said that sometimes they do tell us very directly, I'm going to kill myself. When they come and tell us that, are they going to tell us I'm going to do something stupid or I'm going to do something crazy? No, they say I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to hurt myself. We need to consider that language when we're asking this question. So after you've looked for warning signs, the next thing you do, answering your question, is just to ask about suicide. A very good way to ask this so that it doesn't seem so random is to use those warning signs that you've just seen. You know, I've noticed you've been very depressed. You've not been at family functions much. You haven't been going to work, and you don't seem like yourself. I'm really worried about you, and I'm wondering if you're maybe thinking of suicide. So you've just given them a reason. I'm not asking just because I have a very good reason to ask, and this is what it is. Any questions about this first step? Yes, ma'am.
That big word up there, what is that?
Oh, you're on the wrong slide. Okay.
What that mean?
This is the next step, so I'm going to talk about that right now. Okay, so again, the first step, really, the first thing you have to do is find the warning signs. The second step is asking the tough question. Now we're going to listen. So after they've told us that they're thinking of suicide, they're going to want to tell us their story. It may be, you know, our general tendency may be to try to offer them advice. You know, people tell you they're in pain, you try to find the perfect words to make them feel better. We all do that, don't we? Has anybody ever had any luck finding the perfect words? You always kind of seem to fall short, don't you? The good news here is that there are no perfect words. The perfect words are the things that you don't say. All you have to do at this point is listen. Listen to their story. They're going to tell you all about all of the bad things that are going on in their life. All you have to do is listen. This is you building a relationship with them so you can get them to the next point, which is agreeing to work on safety. So if you listen to their story long enough, it's mostly going to be about death, and it's going to be about life. It's going to be about problems. It's going to be about, you know, I'm getting a divorce, my kids hate me, I'm broke, I'm about to get kicked out of my house. Here are all the horrible things going on in their life. But you may find some ambivalence. That's that word at the top. Ambivalence means that although they're thinking about death, there's still some part of them that's clinging to life. So they want to die, but they want to live. They just need help exploring their options. So in this step, we're listening to their reasons for wanting to die so that we can find something to connect them to life, some reason for wanting to live. Once we find that reason, then we can get them to start working on safety. So if in the middle of their story about death, they say something about a child, you say, tell me about your kid. Well, I really love my children. Well, you might, that's your ambivalence right there. That's your thing that lets you know there is part of them that wants to live. Even if you don't find a reason, even if a reason for wanting to live is not very clear, the fact that they're sitting here talking to you about suicide, about their choices, that's their ambivalence. If their mind was fully made up, they wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. They would be out somewheres putting their plan in motion. So ambivalence simply means they want to die, but there's always part of them that wants to live. You find that part that wants to live, and now you can start to work on safety. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. One thing I forgot to mention in step 2. When we hear their story, we don't want to be judgmental about it. Whatever their reasons for wanting to die, remember, that's their pain. It's very real to them. We just have to respect that. The other thing we don't want to do in step 2 is give advice. This is not a time to give advice. It's also not a time to fix their problems. So they're going to have a laundry list of problems as big as their arm. We can't fix those for them. All we can do right now is listen and get them to somebody who can start working on those problems. So in step 3, the goal in step 3 is to ask if they have a plan for suicide. And the very reason for this is that they're talking to you, they're open, they're connected with you, they're sharing information. We want to keep that conversation going so that at some point we have a way to disable that suicide plan. All we need to ask here is, do you have a plan? If so, what is it? Do you have access to those means? So if their plan is to shoot themselves, we need to know, do you have a gun? Do you have access to a weapon? Where is this weapon? If it's at their house, then at some point we're going to have to find a way to get that gun removed. So clarify, we're asking about their plan, because what do we know about their plan? If they have one, what does that mean? Not only are they serious about it, but there's a pretty good chance, right, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to happen. Remember, that's a level that indicates greater risk for us. And we also want to know if they've attempted in the past, because why is this important? If they've attempted in the past, what does that mean for us?
That they may do it in the future?
Right, there's a greater likelihood that they'll complete in the future. So these just kind of give us a level of how serious the threat is that we're dealing with. So clarify, do you have a plan? Have you ever attempted before? That's all we're doing here. Okay, next please. In step 4, we call this an action plan. This is really a plan to stay safe. So at this point, let's assume that we've helped them as much as we can possibly help them. We can't let them go home because we know there's a plan in place. There may be a gun at home. There may be pills at home. There may be knives at home. We can't let them go home. How many of you are counselors? Okay, good. So at this point, let's assume that we can't have ongoing counseling sessions with them. We just need to connect them to somebody that can help. So that's what we're going to do at this point. At this point, our action plan is going to be, let's look at who we can connect you with. So you need to find resources for them. If you don't know of any resources, you guys are going to learn about a resource in a little while. Of course, the Crouch Foundation is always a resource as well. But resources for suicide can be 911. If the person is a threat and there's nothing else we can do for them, we can call 911. We can call the 1-800-273-TALK number, which is on those brochures that you guys have. That's the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. They can connect you to resources. If they've seen a counselor before, or if they have a doctor, a general practitioner, a family doctor, those guys can be their resources. We just need to connect them to somebody so that we know that they're going to be safe. They're not going home to a house that has a gun in it, or knives, or pills, or whatever their plan is. Also, it's a good idea to connect them to a personal resource. So we may want to ask, is there somebody in your family that you're really close to that we can call for help? So if the person says, I'm really close to my mom, she could help out a lot, well, then we may want to call mom and say, look, mom, we have so-and-so here with us. They've just told us they're thinking about suicide. Could you go and get the gun out of the house? So now we have a plan. We're connecting them to resources, and we're disabling the suicide plan. So that's what goes into an action plan. In an action plan, we're connecting to resources, and we're creating a plan to disable the plan. So notice what that means. I'm not asking you guys to go and disable the suicide plan. If you're working with somebody, if this is somebody you've never met, or somebody you know very distantly, you're not going to want to go into their house and take their gun. Now, if it's your own child, you may want to do that, or a close, family member or friend, you may feel comfortable disabling that suicide plan. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you don't have to do that. And at no point do you want to put yourself in risk, in danger. Get somebody else to do that. So just to kind of summarize again, in step 4, our action plan, or our plan for safety, we're connecting them to a professional resource, such as a hospital, an ER, a counselor, a doctor, or the suicide prevention hotline. We're connecting them to a personal resource who can disable their suicide plan. And we're creating a plan to disable the suicide plan. Is that clear? Okay. Next slide, please. So this is our last step. Our last step is simply follow through. What this means is whatever we created as part of our plan in step 4, we actually carry that out. So if our connection to a resource is their counselor, so maybe they have a counselor that they've seen, at this point we would want to call the counselor. If we've identified a personal resource who can go and disable the plan, we would call that person, actually call them, and ask them to go and disable the plan. So if we're working with Joe and his plan is that he has a bottle of pills at home and he says his sister is a resource. Well, we would call Joe's sister and say, I'm here with Joe. He told me that he's been thinking about suicide. His plan is to take some pills, but he's willing to get rid of the pills. Would you be willing to go to his house and get rid of them? And the sister says yes, so she takes care of that, and she agrees to kind of help Joe along the way. At the same time, we call Joe's counselor. He gets an appointment to see his counselor right now, so he leaves you and he goes to his counselor. The plan is disabled, and Joe now has a safety contact. Now, if Joe wouldn't agree to a safe plan, if Joe said, I don't want to get rid of the pills, or I don't want to go see a counselor, I'm fine just the way I am, then at that point, we may have to take other measures and call 911, call the police, get other people involved. But as long as our person at risk is willing to go along with a safe plan, our job is done, because now we're connecting them to somebody else that can help. The very big thing about this is that at no point are you expected to go beyond what you're comfortable with. We don't expect you guys to be counselors. I don't expect you to fix their problems. I'm not even going to ask you to take care of their suicide plan. All you have to do is connect them to somebody that can really carry the ball further, that can do the work from here on out. Any questions about the steps to intervention? Okay, next slide, please. So so these are our steps, just kind of briefly. So we're looking for warning signs. Once we find those warning signs, we're asking the tough question. Are you thinking about suicide? Once they say yes, then all we have to do is listen. So we might say, well, tell me what's going on. Why are you thinking about suicide? And then we hear their story. We hear their story about all of the negative things that are happening in their life in hopes that we find something positive, or that we can at least get them to agree to look at other options, look at options to keep them safe. Once we get that, we want to clarify, do you have a plan? Do you have a suicide plan? And have you ever done this before? Once we have that information, we look at some resources. Look, these are some people that you can call. These are some places that you can go. Is there anybody in your family that we can connect you with? Once we have that information, then we actually make those connections. So we connect them to the doctor, to the counselor, to the suicide hotline, to their personal resources, and we make sure that that plan is taken care of. Okay, next please. So just very briefly about the Crouch Foundation, most of our services are educational in nature. So we do go out to schools. Most of our programs are in schools. We talk to teachers about warning signs and how to help students at risk. We also talk to students about warning signs. We encourage them to get help for themselves and their friends, because we know that those 30% of students who are thinking about suicide are probably telling a friend, if anybody. So we want students to know what to do. We offer a survivor of suicide support group that's free for anybody who's lost someone to suicide. And we also offer safe talk and assist trainings, which are standardized trainings, and we offer CEUs for those. A lot of this information is on our website, crouchfoundation.org. You have that website on some of those brochures. So please feel free to give us a call, email us, just reach out to us if we can help you in any way or if you have any questions. Any final questions right now? Okay, so Jermaine is with Volunteers of America. I forgot to introduce them at the beginning, I'm sorry. And she's going to tell you about some of the programs that Volunteers of America has to offer.
I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight and joining us. We think this is a really important topic. I want to tell you a little bit more about my organization. And the reason why we're doing this, and we're really pleased to have partnered with Jacob Crouch, because we recognize that suicide prevention is an important topic. And the reason why we've chosen to partner with Jacob Crouch is because we provide services to persons with a mental illness. And as Lori mentioned before, is that persons with a mental illness are more likely to complete suicide. Now, a person with a mental illness, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to commit suicide. They're not at a higher risk for suicide, But when persons who have completed suicide, over 90% of those persons have had a diagnosed mental illness. One of the reasons that we feel like people have completed suicide is because their mental illness has been either undertreated, undiagnosed, or they haven't really gotten the level of services that they really need in order to work with their mental illness. So that is the reason why that Volunteers of America is really big on providing the service that we provide, so that we can ensure that we're helping to try to allay some of those people's concerns and their hopelessness, so that they don't complete suicide. As they said before, most of the clients who have been diagnosed with a mental illness and who have completed suicide are persons who have had a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, persons with personality disorders, as well as persons who have co-occurring disorders, who have a mental illness, as well as are actively using substances, and that is the clients that Volunteers of America is serving. A lot of the clients that have committed suicide have also been persons who've been non-compliant with meds, or they're non-compliant with treatments. They haven't had any follow-up. They talked a little bit about persons that recently got out of the hospital are more likely to complete suicide. And so when clients work with us, we really try to put a lot of services in place for clients who've been hospitalized and who are getting out of the hospital. Also, clients who are actively psychotic are also more likely to complete suicide. And so Volunteers of America has a variety of services that will help clients in those particular situations. We have multidisciplinary teams. We have our services are really comprehensive. We provide everything from intensive case management, assertive community treatment. We have a day treatment program. We have several housing programs, because we found that also persons who are homeless, or who really are feeling hopeless about their situations, our clients who isolate are more likely to complete suicide. And so we really are trying to put these services in place to ensure that we're kind of trying to address some of these issues. We also work with clients who are homeless. We have a homeless program that works with homeless individuals to help them to meet their needs. We also provide benefits assistance. A lot of times we have clients who aren't getting everything that they can get. And so Volunteers of America will have plans in place to ensure that if a client does qualify for a service, that we're able to address those issues. We also provide transportation so that we can ensure that there's not a reason that you're not going to the doctor or you're not going to see your mental health professional because you don't have transportation. So we have put those things in place. One of our largest, the persons who we serve adults, 18 and over. The clients that we do serve have an active case, usually, with one of the mental health centers, or if they have Medicaid, and they have Magellan Medicaid, they qualify for 1915, Volunteers of America is able to provide services. We provide services in the 7 parishes of Region 4. So wherever the clients are, we're able to go out to them. So they don't, most of our programs are community-based. So we go out to the clients, we bring the services out to the clients, and we're able to provide the level of care and the services that the clients may need. And it's all in trying to ensure that clients don't fall through the cracks. So we put a comprehensive program in place to ensure that we're addressing those needs. One of our largest program is our intensive case management program. And our intensive case management program is supervised by Kelly Davis, who has graciously agreed to run my slideshow for me today. And Kelly is over our intensive case management program. Our intensive case management program, as I said before, it is community-based, so we go out to the clients' homes, and our goal is to ensure that clients are safe, and also that clients don't cycle in and out of the hospital. Because, as Lori said before, that a lot of times clients are more likely to complete a suicide like in the 2 weeks following a hospitalization. So we're trying to put all these services in place so that we can address some of these needs. In case management, our goal is to strive to improve the client's quality of life, to show them that there are things in place to ensure that they don't feel hopeless and they don't feel helpless. We also encourage socialization. Clients with mental illness are more likely to isolate, and that's really not a good idea, because you need to put things in place to ensure that clients know that there are resources available. And the case manager is a huge resource for the clients that we serve. We also work with clients on completing and providing crisis intervention services. We work with them on completing crisis plans. And these are plans that are developed, while the client is doing well. We're asking them, who are your resources? If you were to get sick, what would it look like? So that we can kind of know some of the warning signs, and we can know who are the people that we can employ and we can call to assist them so that they don't get to a point where they're feeling like suicide is their only option. The case managers meet with the clients at, most times it's weekly, sometimes it's every other week, just kind of dependent on what they're authorized for through Magellan. And Magellan will authorize both our Medicaid as well as our non-Medicaid clients. We also encourage, through case management, we also encourage medication compliance and follow-up of the services. We really strongly encourage clients to get with their mental health providers, attend their mental health appointments, as well as take the mental health medicines so they can stay stable. Okay? Our second, another service that we have is assertive community treatment. And assertive community treatment is headed by Margaret Seague, who's a licensed professional counselor. ACT is an evidence-based model. It is a model that is a multidisciplinary model where we have, we work with the clients who their needs are a lot higher than the clients who are in case management. So clients who have kind of cycled in and out of the hospitals, clients who have greater need as far as their mental health services are concerned, can be served through assertive community treatment. Assertive community treatment has been kind of defined as a hospital without walls. We have a psychiatrist, we have a nurse practitioner, we have vocational employment specialists, we have mental health professionals, we have substance abuse professionals, because the client, the services are also geared towards clients with co-occurring disorder. So if substance abuse issues are what the clients need to work on, they're able to get those things in assertive community treatment. Assertive community treatment, whereas ICM only sees them about once a week, once every other week, assertive community treatment, the clients are seen a lot more frequently because their needs are greater. So on average, clients are seen about 3 to 4 times a week, just depending on their needs. A lot of times right when they're getting out of the hospital, we put them on a 14-day schedule. So for the first 2 weeks, we'll see that client every day to ensure that their needs are being met. And as I said before, the services are delivered in the homes or delivered wherever the client is feeling comfortable. Because we don't want them to, it's clients who failed their traditional mental health services, and we want to put those strategies in place to ensure that those needs are being met. Okay, so that is assertive community treatment in a nutshell. Our next program is our, and ACT does serve clients with the severe mental illness. So clients who have a mood disorder, who have schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, those are the clients who are more likely to qualify for ACT services. Okay. Our next program is Pont du Jour, which is headed by Jessica Fontenot. And Pont du Jour is a psychiatric day treatment program, and the program is housed at Tyler Mental Health. It's a small program because based on space constraints, we're only able to serve about 20 people. But we take people from all over the region, and we provide the lunch as well as transportation in order for them to get to the program. And it's a really good program, and we really encourage people to do Pont du Jour because the program focuses especially on clients who have gotten out of the hospital. She talked a little bit about how, that when a client in the hospital, they have all these services wrapped around them. But whenever they get out of the hospital, all their services have dropped. So Pont du Jour is a way, it's kind of an intermediate program that'll be able to provide the level of services for the clients. And it's from Monday through Friday from 9 to 3 p.m. It's a recovery-based model. It's holistic in nature, and it works on individual as well as group counseling. Whenever the clients are identifying as their goals for themselves, we will help them to work toward those goals. So that is our day treatment program. We've been extremely successful with our day treatment program, and we've had a lot of clients who have come in and out of the program. We also have several housing programs. they talked a little bit about, and Maisie Paulette is the person who's over our housing program, and we have 2 supervised independent living facilities, Peaceful Village as well as River Oaks. And those programs are supervised independent living facilities. At Peaceful Village, it's single room occupancy. Every client has their own room. They're able to come and they're able to live with us, and our goal is to help them to socialize, one, but it's also to help them to become more adjusted, and it's also to help them to know about what's available in the community, and it's to help them to become stable so that one day they're able to live on their own. And we work with them on their independent living skills so that we are able to address some of those issues. They're able to stay with us for 2 years, and it's a nominal fee for them to be able to live with us. And during that time, we're encouraging them to save money so that one day when they get out, they'll have something saved so they don't feel as hopeless and as helpless as they were before they came into our program. We are able to serve 24 clients in that program. We also have River Oaks, which is our other supervised independent living facility. And that program has 20 beds. It's 10 apartments, but the clients share common living areas. They have their own rooms, but they share a bathroom, a kitchen, and the living spaces. And we really feel like it's a really good program because, again, it helps to eliminate the isolation that clients feel. We also encourage them to do things in the community because we recognize that clients who are out in the community and who are building support networks are less likely to complete suicide than clients who don't feel like they have anything. So that's what we're doing. And during that time, they also work with a case manager who will assist them with everything from getting their benefits, learning independent living skills, learning coping skills. All those things are in place while they're living with us. Again, they're able to stay with us for up to 2 years while they're living at River Oaks, and they're going to get all of their needs met through case manager as well as through the River Oaks staff. Okay. We also have a program, administrative case management, where we work with clients to try to help them to secure benefits. A lot of times, clients are able to apply for Social Security benefits or disability benefits, but they really don't kind of know all the steps that's needed. A lot of times they want to do it on their own, and that may not be the best thing because they don't have everything gathered that they're going to need in order to get those things. So we do have a person who will assist them with everything from getting their medical records, assisting them with preparing for when they go in front of the judge. A lot of times clients, are doing poorly, but it's human nature that we want to put our best foot forward when in front of the judge. And so they're really saying things that they really maybe not doing, or they're dressed up in something that they wouldn't do on a normal day. So the person will really work with them on learning what they really should say, what they should identify, and what things will help them to have better success. And we've really been successful with getting their benefits because I think that Stephanie has a really high percentage rate of clients that she's assisted with getting their benefits. So she's doing a really good job, and we really try to, if a client is eligible for the benefits, we really work closely with them to ensure that they're getting their benefits. We also have, and I think I missed PATH. We also have a PATH program. And the good thing about it is that we've been to several different places, and we've always had to tell people, that PATH is really not, they're not eligible for PATH because it's really in Lafayette Parish. So now we do have a program that is able to work with the homeless. We have a person who will go out and he works with both the street level homeless as well as the sheltered homeless. So homeless individuals who are living in the homeless shelters. He will assist them with, he will ensure that they're getting to their mental health appointments. He identifies them if he feels that they have an undiagnosed mental illness. He will really try to work closely with that client to ensure that they're getting an appointment with the mental health center. That, once they get it, that he's able to help them with ensuring that they're compliant with medicines. He's able to help them with trying to locate some housing for them because, he's really trying to put everything in place to ensure that the client is not feeling as hopeless as they are likely feeling. So he's really good about working with the homeless and really ensuring that, that we're putting everything in place so that we can meet their needs and so that they don't fall through the cracks. going back. And then our next program is transportation services. A lot of times, clients aren't able to, they're not compliant with meds, or they're not compliant with their appointments because they don't have access, or they don't have a way to get to a psychiatrist. They don't have a way to get to mental health appointments. We're putting things in place to ensure that they don't have a reason for not going. So we will provide assistance with getting them to their appointments in the form of bus tickets. If they're here in Lafayette and they're on a bus line, we will provide them with the bus tickets to ensure that they're getting to their appointments. And even if it's as far as case management, helping them to learn the bus routes, riding with them the first few times to learn the bus routes. We'll also help them with cab fares. We have a small transportation contract. I always say that because we don't have a lot of money as far as transportation is concerned, but the money that we do have, we really try to make it, reach as many people as we can. We also have clients who live in some of the outlying areas. We have contracts with some of the vendors, other nonprofits that provide transportation. And we will get a contract where they will pick up the clients from wherever they're living to bring them to the mental health center in the area where they live. And so we do have, we are able to provide, those services to ensure that clients are getting to the appointments and they're keeping appointments. We focus primarily on mental health appointments as well as physical health appointments because we feel like those are the things that we really need to focus on. So that's our program in a nutshell. It's a lot of information. We weren't able to touch everything today. But, however, if you have any questions about any of the programs that we've talked about today or you want additional information, please feel free to give us a call. On the sheet when you signed in, we asked that if you had questions about any of our services and you want additional information, for you to please check the box, and we will be happy to give you a call so that we can explain more about the services that we do provide. We are extremely proud of the service that we do provide, and we really feel like we're reaching out to the community, and that is our goal, to reach as many people as we can, and we feel like this is allowing us to be able to do that. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight.